Shalom, dear friends, and welcome. Today we continue our course After the Flame, which explores the history from the year 70, that is, the year of the destruction of Jerusalem, up to the year 325. This is the era of the birth of Christianity, or the proclamation of Christianity as the main orthodoxy of the Roman Empire. It is precisely this period of time and history that we will study in great detail throughout this entire year. Today we are already at Lesson 9. Today we are talking about who the Gnostics and Hellenes are and, in general, the problem of Greek philosophy. In yesterday's lesson, we talked to you about who the Nazarenes and Ebionites are. In the previous lesson, before that, we talked about the Apostle Paul, and in general, whether his legacy is still alive. And all this week, we will be discussing these topics with you, which are very important topics for us. Now, before we get into the actual description of the problem, namely how Greek philosophy distorted the gospel, let's talk about these concepts in general. Before we dive into the study and research, let's talk about these very concepts, about who the Gnostics are. And why did Gnosticism, which arose in the 1st and 2nd centuries AD in the bubbling cauldron of the Hellenistic world, where Jewish, Persian, Egyptian, and Greek ideas all mixed together, come about? First, we'll talk about the essence of the subject, the essence of this lesson, and then we'll move on to the root system itself. So, what did the Gnostics borrow? The idea of two worlds. The Gnostics adopted Plato's division into the world of ideas, which is the highest true world, the spiritual world, and the world of things, which is the lower material world, essentially a distorted copy of the spiritual world. For the Gnostics, this turned into a contrast between the divine pleroma, that is, fullness, and the corrupt material cosmos. The apostles were already struggling against these ideas because as soon as all this reached the Greek mind, it immediately turned into exactly that. The concept of the demiurge. In other words, in the dialogue Timaeus, Plato describes the demiurge as a divine craftsman who created our world by looking to the world of ideas. But the Gnostics reinterpreted this image. Their demiurge is identified with the God of the Old Testament. This is an ignorant, malicious being who, out of prideful error, created the material world as a prison for divine sparks. They also said that the Jewish Torah is likewise the laws of this prison, and therefore to turn to it or study it at all is a great sin. There are also ideas of the dualism of soul and body. The idea that the soul is a divine particle imprisoned in the darkness, in the prison of the body, which in Greek is called the body, the tomb. This idea was very close to the Gnostics. Even back then, they rejected entirely the historical and bodily shell of Yeshua, and they withdrew completely into spiritual worlds. Today, you probably can't even imagine how deeply Christianity is actually immersed in the dualism of these concepts and, in general, in Greek philosophy. Now, terms like gnosis, knowledge, aeon, eternity, divine emanation, nous, mind, and others were taken directly from Greek philosophy. But they were filled with new mystical meaning. Despite all the borrowings, the Gnostics were deeply hostile to the spirit of Hellenic philosophy. This hostility is at the heart of the problem. What did they reject? For most Greek philosophers, for example, Plato and Aristotle or the Stoics, the cosmos was an orderly, harmonious, and good creation. It was a reflection of the divine mind. But for the Gnostics, the cosmos was the result of a mistake, an abortion of the divine world, a prison created by an evil and ignorant demiurge. The value of reason and logic. The Hellenes believed that the path to truth lay through reason, dialectic, and logical knowledge. But the Gnostics, on the other hand, claimed that the world and its laws were created by an evil demiurge, which means that human reason or logic are merely tools of this prison. And true salvation comes not from rational meaning, but from a certain gnosis, an irrational mystical revelation, a flash of intuitive insight into one's own divine nature and the way home. Greek philosophy, like the Judeo-Christian tradition, saw the creator of the world as a good and all-powerful God. The Gnostics, however, introduced a radical distinction between the true, unknowable, transcendent God, the first Father, and the demiurge creator, who is a lower, imperfect being. In other words, Greek ethics were aimed at achieving harmony within the framework of the polis. The polis refers to city-states. From this word comes megapolis or cosmos. The Gnostics, on the other hand, were radical individualists, spiritual anarchists. Since the world is corrupt, all its laws, moral norms, and social institutions, including marriage, childbirth, and especially women, are nothing but pointless tricks of the demiurge to keep the soul trapped in matter. Therefore, the soul must break free and escape. Thus, the relationship between the Gnostics and the Hellenes is actually a paradox. Gnosticism can be called a parasite on the body of Greek philosophy. It used its language and structures to express an idea that is directly opposed to the very essence of Hellenism. If Greek philosophy is a hymn to reason, to the beautiful cosmos that is the logos, then Gnosticism is the soul scream of horror, realizing itself as a stranger in this world, striving to break free and leave it behind, a kind of ascension. This problem was obvious even to the most ancient philosophers. The great Neoplatonist philosopher Plotinus wrote an entire treatise against the Gnostics, in which he fiercely criticized them for their pessimism, for slandering the beautiful cosmos and its creator, and for intellectual dishonesty. He saw them as those who took Platonic tools in order to destroy the very edifice of Platonism. So, with this greatest accumulation, with this immense piling up of concepts, we move on to the main point. As soon as, even during the lives of the apostles, and especially after their time, when the Greeks began to take charge, Greek bishops started running the Messianic communities. They practically began to push out and eliminate all Jewish thought, replacing it with Greek philosophy. Today, we will talk about how the Torah stands against this philosophy, how the Word. It is not the same as the Logos, and how Greek philosophy distorted the gospel. Today, we won't be talking about a battle fought on the fields of war, but about a battle that took place in the minds and hearts of people. This is a battle for reality itself, for how we see God, the world, and humanity. On one side, there is the worldview of the Torah, and on the other side, the world of Greek philosophy, whose extreme manifestation is Gnosticism. And it was actually this Gnosticism that the apostles fought against in their epistles. When John tried to explain what is opposed to the Messiah, who confesses Yeshua, the Messiah, as having come in the flesh, and who does not confess him as having come as a man in the flesh, there is the spirit of Antichrist. And the Gnostics, they tried to get rid of everything human and fleshly and considered all material and physical things to be merely an illusion tied to sinful elements. But I want us to go even deeper and understand that the believers in Yeshua were defending not just a religion, but actually the Jewish worldview. And the central question of this struggle is the person and ministry of the Messiah himself. Was he a product of the Greek world, a myth about God in the flesh? And that is exactly a product of the Greek world. Or was he something much deeper and rooted in the Tanakh itself? Today, we'll take a look at a few examples of how the New Testament presents Yeshua as the perfect answer of the Torah to the challenge of Greek thought. The first thing I want to start with today is what the Gospel of John begins with. And in general, the Gospel of John is often cited as the greatest argument for the triumph of the Greek language. And overall, Christianity is very Hellenized. Greek words are constantly quoted, and Greek concepts are constantly cultivated. Just so you understand, the Greek language has no connection whatsoever to the actual scriptures, and the imagery of the Greek language has nothing to do with it. Everything comes down to Hebrew. So John chapter 1, verse 1 says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." This is the first thing the synodal text resorts to, trying to prove to us that all the postulates, in fact, are actually written in Hebrew. And when we read this word, that is, what is translated as "in the beginning," the sages of Israel have always asked, what is this word? After all, it isn't actually read as "in the beginning." In the beginning is the Word, but is something completely different. And of course, the answer lies on the surface, in understanding the word "word." Therefore, the word should not be understood as beginning, but rather from its root, that is, head or first of all. From this, we begin to understand that if we look at the book of Proverbs, chapter 8, verses 22 to 31, we will see wisdom. Solomon wrote, "The Lord possessed me at the beginning of his way." And here he uses this word. The Lord possessed me at the beginning of his way. It says beginning there if you read the synodal version. But in reality, it means at the head of his way, before all his creations. Then I was beside him as a master craftsman, a skilled and expert artisan. That is, it can be clearly understood as master, or plan, or architect, a designer of great things. And I was his constant delight every single day. Now, if I show you the Holy Bible, there are some truly amazing and profound things written here within its sacred pages. One moment, just a second. This is the inspired book of Proverbs, chapter 8, verse 30. It explicitly says, "Then I was brought up with him, nurtured and raised in his presence." And I was brought up there, right there with him. And here this word is used, meaning instructor, coach, or tutor. This is in the 30th verse, if you read directly from the Hebrew. If we read in the synodal text, it says, "Then I was beside him as a master craftsman." But actually, it's not an artist. It's a skilled master or tutor. Now, when we read these verses, from this we understand where the Apostle Paul gets the idea that the Torah was a tutor leading to the Messiah, that is, an instructor. It is the instructor. Everything comes from this verse, from this word in the book of Proverbs, chapter 8, verse 30. In other words, when we read all 4 verses before this, we see how Solomon describes the greatest wisdom that existed, that was there, with which the Creator made this whole world, and so on and so forth. Now Rashi comments on an interesting thing. He says that the word directly means that the Creator looked into the Torah and created this world. That is, the Torah is not just a book of laws given at Sinai, as many people think. Now, when you study Hebrew with me, you understand that it's not just a set of rules, that the Torah is the greatest wisdom ever given to humanity. The very language of the Torah explains to us the nature of existence itself. In other words, the Torah itself is the blueprint and the instruction manual by which the Creator made this world. In Jewish Torah, in Jewish thought, the Torah is the eternal divine plan. It's the matrix. It's the very blueprint by which the universe itself was created. It's wisdom itself. It's the very energy of the Creator clothed in form. This is fundamentally important. The world is not chaotic, nor is it a mistake, as the Gnostics claimed. It was created according to a perfect plan. And that plan is found in the Torah. And this is the line of defense against Greek dualism, which divides everything into good and bad. Dualism is the idea, so dualism, spirit is good and matter is evil. And everything that relates to the spirit is wonderful. Everything that relates to matter is bad. The demiurge is the creator God. But the Gnostics took this idea to the extreme and claimed that the creator of the material world, that is, the God of the Tanakh, is an evil and ignorant tyrant. Oh, he sheds so much blood. He commands the destruction of entire nations. He does things like that. No, 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 no. This is God Yahweh. He is bloodthirsty. We have our God love itself, and the Torah is the law of the jailer. Accordingly, the Torah itself is the rule of this prison. And now we come to the doctrine of salvation. And salvation is an escape from this prison. To be saved means to escape from this world, from the evil creator God to the good God Jesus. This is actually the complete opposite of the idea that God is good and his creation is very good, and his Torah is wisdom and life. Gnosticism was not just a heresy. It was a total attack on the God of the Tanakh and on the foundations of Israel's faith. But it was precisely these ideas that gradually seeped in and slowly became the root system of Christianity itself. Now let's move on. Let's go even deeper and even further. This is exactly how the Creator made this world. He looked into the Torah not just as instructions or suggestions or as letters. He looked into it as a kind of map by which the universe itself exists. Let's remember this image. Let's keep this image in mind so we can move even further. So we now return to John, who thoughtfully responds to this profound challenge, because he truly begins his significant message with powerful words that every devout Jew would instantly understand on the deepest, most fundamental level of their being. John chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning was the Word, but the word doesn't exist at the beginning. What exists is the word bereshit. And we've understood that bereshit doesn't mean in the beginning. Bereshit means at the head of creation. And it's not logos, but the word davar. Davar is not just logos. Davar is not a static Greek concept. Deuteronomy is called devarim, words using this very word. This is the Jewish concept of God's will, which is active. In fact, it's the creative energy of the very book of Genesis itself. It's the word that, according to the prophet Isaiah, accomplishes what it is sent to do. As we have established, this eternal davar is in essence and in power the Torah itself. John says, all things came into being through him. In other words, this directly refers us to that midrash that God looked into the Torah, into the davar, and created the world. In other words, what exactly did John write, and how were his words distorted? So what was actually written? At the very beginning, above all else, there was the Word, which is the davar, which is the Torah. And this Word, this Torah, was with God. And this Torah was used by God. He looked into it and created this whole world. And the key verse is the 14th. It is written, and the davar became flesh and dwelt among us. It is written, the Word became flesh. Now, all the Trinitarians usually think, oh, see, this proves it. In reality, once again, logos and davar are completely different words. Greek thinking sees incarnation here. That is, the deity is enclosed in material flesh. But, excuse me, this is absolutely not a Jewish idea. It never existed. God cannot be flesh. God is God, and he is not a man. John is not saying this. So what is he saying? It is written, became flesh. That is, this does not mean that the immaterial turned into the material. It's more like an idiom meaning manifested in the material world, entered human history. In other words, the Torah entered history through its Messiah and was revealed through him. Then, when the phrase dwelt among us is used, the Greek word eskenosin is used. I'll even go into the Greek words now. This comes from the root skene, which means tabernacle, a tent. This refers us back to the Mishkan, the tabernacle in the wilderness. So what was happening in the Mishkan? The divine presence. His Shekinah dwelled among the people, but did not become the people themselves, and the tabernacle did not become God himself. It became only the very place where the Creator dwelled, where God's glory and power were concentrated and manifested. So what is John actually saying in his epistle? What does he want to tell us? Because we read everything the other way around. But we need to read it with a Jewish mindset. And the dabar, the living Torah, the living power of the Torah, did not become a human being, but pitched its tent in the person of Yeshua, through whom it acted in his life. Yeshua was not the embodiment of the Torah in the sense of a Greek deity. Yeshua was a man in whom the dabar of God, the living Torah, dwelled in such fullness, in such power, and in such purity as never before. And here I would like to show you something, namely this. Everything Yeshua did with his people, whether he was healing, speaking, raising the dead, walking, wandering, preaching, or doing anything else, everything he did exclusively and in accordance with the Torah. we need to understand why he did this. His teaching is not his personal philosophy. It is God's Dvar, that is, God's Word. It is the Dvar speaking through him. His miracles are not just some kind of magic. Again, it is the Dvar of God acting through him. His life is not perfect fulfillment. His life is the perfect fulfillment of the Torah, not just as a set of rules, but as the living will of the Father. The Torah was the power by which he lived and performed his miracles. That is why he could say, "The words I speak to you are not just words to be read, but dvarim." Dvarim. The dvarim that I speak to you, that is, the words of the Torah that I speak to you, I do not speak on my own. The Father, who dwells in me, he does the works. The Father did the works through the Dvar that dwelled in him, that is, through the very Torah that he studied, taught, and lived by. And this is the highest form of Jewish thought. This is exactly how it should be understood. And if we understand this in some other distorted Greek way of gods incarnating as humans, then we are actually distorting the very essence of the Torah and failing to understand the form in which it was created and written. In other words, Yeshua was a perfect vessel and conduit, a kind of mishkan for the living Torah of God. And that's why, as soon as he opened his mouth, he preached it. Let's move on. Greek philosophy and Gnosticism offered salvation from this world. They often offered salvation from this evil god and, of course, from the Torah itself, which they saw as merely ceremonial laws. But the answer of the New Testament is rooted in the Torah itself. Let's move on. Yeshua in this context is not a compromise with Hellenism. He is the triumph of Jewish thought itself. He showed that the problem is not with matter and not with the Torah. The problem is human sin, and the solution is not to escape from the world, but to live a life where the Dvar, the Torah itself, the living will and power of the Torah, operates in full measure. Faith in Yeshua, therefore, does not abolish the Torah, but affirms it at the highest level. It shows what the purpose of the Torah was from the very beginning, not to be a dead letter on parchment, but to become a living force, transforming a person from within and working through them. Yeshua became the first and perfect example of this. But let's go even further. At the very least, we still have half an hour left. Let's go even further, much further than before. Here we are approaching the very heart of the problem. How was the original worldview, as profoundly given and presented in the sacred Torah, gradually and subtly replaced by a completely foreign and alien philosophy? And what significant and far-reaching consequences has this profound shift ultimately led to in our world today? We will ask ourselves, what mission did the Creator leave for us? Did he tell us to care for this world, to repair and cultivate it, or to prepare for evacuation, packing our suitcases while waiting for a flight to heaven? So what should we do? Should we think about how to fix what lies before us? Or should we prepare for evacuation and constantly speculate about the dates when Yeshua will come to take us away? Because we need to be pulled out of this terrible world. Is that how we think? Our attitude toward our bodies, our families, our work, society, and the planet, all of it stems from this. This is one of the greatest mutations in history. How the biblical Jewish idea of tikkun olam, the repairing of the world, was gradually replaced by the Greek dualistic idea of escaping from this world. And how this idea of escape reached its peak in the modern theory of the rapture of the church. After all, this theory only appeared in the 19th century. And it is precisely this theory that paralyzes our will to act here and now. Why bother to achieve anything, to strive for something, to go anywhere at all? You just need to wait for the evacuation. So, the original intention is the repair of the world. Let's go back to the factory settings, to what the Torah and the entire Tanakh say. Let's do it once more. God created the world and says, "It is very good." He didn't create a prison. He created the Garden of Eden. And what is the first task he gives to man? And the Lord God took the man and placed him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to keep it. This is a mandate for management, care, and development. After the fall, the world was damaged, but the mandate was not revoked. The mandate remained. It was transformed into the concept of repairing the world, tikkun olam. The entire history of Israel is a story of partnership with God in this repair. The Creator teaches His people, and through His people, the whole world, how to fix what is broken, not how to prepare, hunker down, surround themselves with walls, and get ready for evacuation. That's why we were given instructions, commandments, through the establishment of justice, through being a light to the nations. Israel was supposed to repair this world, returning it to the divine plan. Now, when we look at the world as a doomed state and endlessly await the apocalypse and the Antichrist, first of all, we see the body as a mortal shell. We don't consider the body or the human being as the greatest divine masterpiece at all. We don't see the body that way. We see the body as a mortal shell. But in fact, the body is the temple of the Spirit of God. Paul, being a Pharisee, understood this perfectly well. Don't you know that your bodies are the temple of the Holy Spirit who lives in you? 1 Corinthians 6:19. The temple must be cared for, sanctified, not despised. But how can you sanctify and care for it if you eat whatever you want? That's why the Lord gives us dietary laws. He gives us laws of conduct. He gives us laws for how to relate to this world. But if we don't want to, we despise our own body and basically say that the body isn't something important to us. In the Christian world, for example, sex was considered a sinful act. And a huge number of Christian fathers preached exactly that. This led to the situation where the Catholic Church invented celibacy. Did that solve the problem? No. Sex is not a sinful act, but a divine gift. So these words, immaculate or sinful conception, come precisely from this way of thinking. There is no sinful conception. Every act of conception is a divine miracle, a profound act of union and creation, given by God within marriage, that is, within the covenant. The entire Song of Songs is a hymn to sacred love, not a shameful text. And what about the woman? The woman is seen as the cause of all lust. And that's why she is always demeaned. But in reality, the woman is not the cause of sin. It is written, she is a helper equal to him. A woman, in herself, is like a guardian angel for a man's soul, not the source of his downfall. The Torah is not a law of imprisonment, but a law of freedom. This is what the Epistle of James, chapter 1, verse 25, tells us. The law of freedom. The Torah does not restrict, but guides, like riverbanks guide a river, giving it strength and purpose. This is the original picture. The Torah is not meant to burden us, but to set us free. The world is a divine project that needs to be repaired. and man is God's partner in this great work. After the apostolic era, when the faith was spreading in the Greco-Roman world, there was a quiet installation of foreign software. Through the works of some early church fathers who had received an excellent Greek education, Platonic dualism began to seep into theology. That is, matter is evil. Instead of tov miid, very good, now matter is considered evil. The idea came that everything material is base, sinful, and temporary. The body itself is a prison. That's why ascetics and monks and all sorts of people appeared. Instead of the body being seen as a temple, it began to be perceived as a prison for the soul, from which one must be freed. So, through all sorts of ideas and various means, the body was subjected to humiliation and destruction. And salvation simply turned into the escape of the human soul. Accordingly, the very purpose of life changed. Now, we no longer try to fix this world. Instead, the salvation of the immortal soul from this cursed world and its ascent to a spiritual, immaterial paradise, that is now our goal. And when people keep saying, "Oh, you were saved," what they really mean is, "Do you have a ticket?" In fact, this was a theological revolution. God, from being an architect who fixes his world, turned into the head of a rescue operation evacuating souls. The world stopped being the center of a valuable project and became a sinking ship. After all, the world is sinking, it's falling apart. Everything will soon burn. Evil is coming soon, the Antichrist. Why do anything at all? Let's just wait for the rapture, the evacuation. We will ascend, we will leave. And let everything else burn in yellow flames. This philosophy of escape developed over centuries, but it reached its peak only recently. In the 1830s, the Anglo-Irish preacher John Nelson Darby formulated and popularized the doctrine of the secret and sorrowful rapture of the church. The essence of it is that before the period of great tribulations, the great sorrow at the coming of the Messiah, all true believers will be secretly taken from the earth to the heavens. What is this, essentially? It's an ejection button. It's the final, absolute act of escapism, a flight from reality. All of this reinforces the foundation of escape. You no longer need to prepare to go through trials, to be a light in this world. Your main plan is to escape before it all begins. In general, this distorts the world, painting it as utterly doomed. That's why, in the eyes of the modern Christian, the world is doomed and there is nothing good in it. And when you talk to believers today, they might tell you all about how wonderful God is and how ugly the world is. This is the opposite of the ideas of the Torah. This doctrine creates a specific attitude toward this world. In general, investing in ecology, in culture, in science, in social justice at all. After all, everything will burn soon. The world is doomed. It actually belongs to the Antichrist. The worse things are in it, the better. Because the worse things get, the closer it brings us to the rapture. This breeds fear and passivity. Instead of being the salt of the earth, preventing decay, many Christians turn into passive observers who, with fear or secret delight, look for signs of the imminent end, instead of looking for opportunities to make things right and to serve. And we are constantly trying to guess when the end will come. When is the end? When will Jesus return? Is it finally the end or not yet? Or maybe, is this already the apocalypse? The apocalypse from Revelation is about God's victory in history. But the book of Revelation, which is about God's victory, turns into a horror movie that makes you want to hide. This doctrine, no matter how popular it is or was, is actually the logical conclusion of rejecting the Jewish idea in favor of the Greek idea of escape. So what should we do? We need to return to the roots. We need to abandon the theology of cosmic tourism and once again take up the responsibility of being God's partners. Our salvation is not just a ticket to heaven. It is a calling to be agents of God's kingdom, here and now. Of course, we also await the new heaven and new earth, the heavenly Jerusalem, where righteousness dwells. This is written in 2 Peter 3 verse 13. We are not waiting for the destruction of the earth, but for its renewal. Our body is not a sinful being. It is the vanguard of the coming resurrection. After all, we will be resurrected, and we should care for it as something sacred. Our families are our workshop, where we learn to love as God loves, correcting our selfishness and returning to the harmony of the Garden of Eden. A woman is not the cause of sin, who pushed Adam and gave him the apple, and he ate it. And because of that, now all sin supposedly comes from women. But a woman is the guardian angel of a man's soul, and without her, no man can fulfill his calling. Our world is not a trash bin to be simply thrown away, but a divine creation. When we fight against injustice, corruption, pollution, and poverty, we are engaged in tikkun olam, and that is what Israel is doing today. All the remarkable advancements in modern medicine, in sophisticated land irrigation techniques, in innovative agricultural practices, in robust defense systems, and indeed in all these crucial areas, Israel is actively and profoundly repairing this world, making significant contributions to global progress and well-being. We do not agree that the world is doomed, and we do not agree that the world is cursed at all. We do not agree that the world will be destroyed, will burn and be annihilated, and that we, after taking off our socks and underwear, will just fly away. We do not agree with this, and that is why we are making this world better. We invented the internet, we invented the digital space, we even invented color movies. We invented everything that today adorns our world, everything it is made of. If it weren't for Israel, today we'd be riding donkeys. In fact, we are speeding up the arrival of the day when God's will is done on earth as it is in heaven. When God's will is done on earth. Yeshua did not call us to run away from the battlefield, from the fight. He prayed to the Father for his disciples. It is written in John 17 verse 15, I do not pray that you should take them out of the world, but that you should keep them from the evil one. Not that you would take them out of this world, but that you would keep them from evil in this world. Our mission is not to look up at the sky waiting for evacuation. Our mission is to look at the earth and think about how to bring more of heaven to it. How to be the hands and feet of the Messiah in this world, continuing the great work of his restoration until the day the King returns to finish what he started. We could talk about these things for a long time. And in fact, deeply Greek philosophy distorted the gospel. And today we are called to this very path in order to return the good news of the Messiah back to its spiritual, historical, and biblical roots. To truly cast off from ourselves the endless and pervasive ideas of Platonism and Gnosticism, and to genuinely engage in the profound correction and healing of this world. Tomorrow we will talk with you about the next topics that are on our agenda for next week. My friends, I wish you all blessings. Thank you for being on this broadcast. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, give us a like, and hit the bell. And click the thank you button. This will help us move forward without fear or doubt. Once again, I wish you all blessings. And we'll see you tomorrow. A big shalom to everyone.